Hey there, this is Dave from e-portfix, and today I want to talk about flat tires. Now, if you ride long enough, you're eventually going to get a flat tire. It's not a matter of if, it's when. A lot of experienced cyclists, changing a flat tire is routine, it's easy to do, and they understand the steps. But there's a lot of people who haven't done it before. Maybe you're one of them, maybe you find it a bit intimidating. I mean, certainly if you've never done it before and you don't know the steps, it's not going to be a simple task to tackle. But it's really not hard, it doesn't take many tools, and so today I'd just like to show you the steps in changing a flat tire and introduce it to you, and maybe you can take on the task next time it happens to you. Come on, let's show you. So today we're going to be talking about clincher tires with tubes inside. Now there's lots of different types of tires and wheel systems used on bikes. Clincher tires with tubes and clincher rims are what we're talking about. Tubular tires are a one-piece tire with a tube sewn inside. They glue onto a rim. That's a different issue, different way to fix that flat. Also, tubeless tires exist where you have the rim and the tire, they seal onto each other without a tube used. We'll cover that another time, but today we're talking about clincher rims, like an open rim like this, clincher tires that are open like this. They mount onto the rim, and then you put a tube inside. So that's what we're going to be dealing with today. So to begin, you come to your bike, the tire's flat. Now, if you haven't ridden a bike in a long time and you come to your bike and one or both tires are flat, could just be that all the air is leaked out. Tubes are porous by their nature. They hold air well, but not perfectly. They do lose pressure after a time. So if you haven't ridden your bike for a while, you come to it, the tire's flat, put air in the tires, maybe it'll hold, maybe it'll be lucky and you won't have to do anything. You just pump them up and you're good to go. But if you're riding your bike and then all the air comes out, or you go to your bike, it's not been that long since you filled up the tires and one of them is flat, then you know you've got to do some repairs. So the first thing you'll need to do is you need to get the wheel off your bike, take off the tire, take out the tube, replace the tube, or figure out what happened. Because if you don't fix the problem, say there's a thorn or something in the tire, you put a new tube in, you can get flat on that tube as well. So you take the wheel off, remove the tire and the tube, fix the problem, replace the tube, remount the tire, fill it back up, and put it back on the bike. So when you have to take your wheel off the bike, there's a couple different systems holding the wheel onto the bike. Quick release could be a nut, a wheel nut screwed on, and then also you got to worry about the brakes. You got to release the brakes. Disc brakes you don't have to worry. V brakes, road calipers, you do have a little step here. Let me show you. Now here we've got a bike with the V brakes. So these are V brakes. The two portions of the brake describe a V. You squeeze in like that. This is a little bit of adjustment anyway. But in any case, so if you have brakes like this, it's far too narrow here for the tire to come off with the brakes in this position, so you got to open them up. Now luckily there is a toolless quick way to do this. Usually there's a little rubber boot here. You pull off that rubber boot, you squeeze the two parts together, and then this will pop out of there. There's a slot in the top here where the cable goes. You pop this piece out. Once that's apart, the brakes will open up and you have plenty of room to drop your tire out. If you've got a bike with caliper brakes like this, you still got to bring the pads apart a little bit to drop the wheel out. So usually you'll see a little quick release, a little lever here that you turn, and what that does, that just opens up the brakes a little bit, gives you room to take the tire out. Now usually the tire matches the rim width pretty closely, so you don't have a lot of movement with this lever, but it is enough to get your wheel out. Now bikes with disc brakes, there's nothing up here at the rim, so all you have to do is release the whatever's holding the wheel in the bike, and then the disc will slide right out of the caliper. Nothing to do with the brakes. So quick release wheels is super simple. You open up the quick release lever, and usually you're going to have to loosen the nut a little bit because of the safety feature on the forks. Okay, just unthread that a little bit, and then your wheel's going to fall right out. Now, bikes without a quick release, especially e-bikes with a hub drive, you're going to find the rear wheel is bolted on. Sometimes there'll be a cover. Usually it's just a plastic cap that can be pulled off. But then you've got a nut to deal with. So you got to find the correct size of the nut and loosen that off. With an e-bike, the additional thing you'll have to do is you'll have to follow this cable that goes to the motor. Usually there's a connector just a little bit further along. You got to undo that connector so that the cable is free. Undo the nuts on both sides because there's a nut on the other side as well. Usually it's the same size. And unthread that along the axle far enough so that you can drop the wheel out. Same thing on a bike with a quick release. On the rear wheel, you always want to put the chain onto the smallest cog. And that's going to give you some clearance so that the chain is as loose as possible, and it's much easier to move the derailleur out of the way. You have to pull the derailleur back, and you see that's going to leave this nice and open for the wheel to drop out without the chain in the way. Now you've got your flat wheel off the bike. At this point, it's helpful to identify what kind of valve you have. There's a couple different valves used on bikes, 3 that I know of: the Schrader, the Presta, and then there's a Dunlop, which here in Canada we don't see very much of, but normally we're dealing with the Schrader and the Presta. This is a Presta. This is Presta valve. This center portion here has to be unthreaded before you can fill it, and then you tighten it back up when it's full. Often you'll have this nut holding the valve stem against the rim. So if you have a valve like this with the nut on it, you want to loosen that off completely at this point. If you've got a Schrader valve, Schrader valves are what you'd find on a car. Looks like this, and just a plastic cap on there, and then if you press that center piece, you're going to let the air out. Otherwise it's going to hold in like that. These, you need to take the cap off to get it out of the rim, but otherwise there's nothing else holding it in there. So your next step will be taking the tube out from the tire. What you'll have to do is you peel the tire back and you lift the edge of the tire over the outside of the rim. And that's going to leave one side on. If you're not changing the tire, if you're just changing the tube, usually you can just leave the tire on. You pull it off one side, the tube will come out, and you can change the tube, inspect your tire and all that. So if you're lucky, you can pull the tire back and work it over the edge of the rim. Once you get a little bit going, you can pull the rest around like that, and it's going to release. You can get your finger in there, just work around a bit more, and you can get the tire off. You can get it open up the whole way. If it's tighter, which is often the case, and you can't get the tire off, you'll want to use a tire lever. Something like this. This goes underneath, gets your tire off the rim, and then usually there's a little hook on the end. You can pop that over the spoke, hold it in place while you get the next one down. Go a little bit further along, pop it off. Sometimes these will come in sets of 3 if you want to do 1, 2, and then get a third one. Usually 2 is sufficient. You can just slide it around, drop 1 if you want, and then tire's loose. Once it's loose like that, you can pull the tube out. And before you go and just yank the tube out and throw it away, what I like to do is I like to have your valve here, pull your tube out, and then if you've got some time, you can put air in your tire, put air in your tube, and it'll leak out where the hole is. Now that's going to be helpful because if you got a puncture and there's something still in the tire, where the hole is going to tell you exactly where your problem is on your tire. Now if you look at it and you see two little holes one beside the other, that's a pinch flat. That means you're just probably running with too little pressure and the tire flattened against the rim and pinched it and got you flat. So there's probably nothing wrong with your tire. You just need to use a bit more pressure or be a bit more careful hitting things next time. If it's a puncture and you fill up the tire and you have a leak on the top of the tire here, then you can reach inside and you want to check the inside of the tire, run your finger around, especially in that spot where the hole was, and check to make sure there's nothing still there. Look in the top of the tread, look underneath, and make sure you've got all the debris out. Once you figured that out, you can come over here, come to the valve, just peel the tire back completely, exposing the backside of the tube at the valve, and then pull it right out. You can discard that. Now, if you're putting in a brand new tube right out of the box, no problem. If you've got a tube that was a spare tube sitting around somewhere, or you found it on a shelf or something, and you're not sure if it's a good tube, it's happened to me before. What I like to do is back up. Before I even take the wheel off the bike, I find my replacement tube. If it's of unknown quality, what I'll do is I'll put some air in it, pump it up a little bit, and get it kind of full like that. And what you want to do is just fill it up, hang it over somewhere, go take care of your bike, take the wheel off, and then by the time you're ready to put one on, if it's still pumped up nice and hard like that, you know the tube is good. If it's gone flat again, you know that this is not a good tube to be using. Now your new tube is going to be all flat. It's going to unwind like this. It's going to be nice and flat and thin. Trying to work with a tube like this, it's really hard to put it in the tire and to get it to fit. It's just going to catch and drag. So what you want to do is you're going to put a bit of air in this, give it some shape, make it a lot easier to work with, make it round and easier to put into the tire. Not a lot, just enough to get it to hold its shape. You got some air in that tire. If it's a Presta, it's helpful just to close the valve, otherwise when you touch the valve here, it'll leak out and you have to start again. So get a little bit of air in the tire, in the tube. Find your valve hole, peel the tire back, insert the tube there, pull the tire over the tube, and then you can go and insert the tube inside your tire. The tire you've already checked to make sure that there's no staple or thorn or anything still sticking in it, and you inspect, make sure the tread is still good, make sure you don't need to be changing your tire, because if you got it off already, it's an easy job to put a new tire on if needed at that point. So once your tube's in the tire, holds its shape like that, then you want to start putting the lip of the tire back into the rim. I like to start at the valve because that's the trickiest part. The valve, usually the tube gets a bit thicker there, especially when it's full, and it's hard to get the tire underneath the tube at that point. So push up on your valve, get your tire rim bead set like that. So your tire's in, and then you can start working your way around. I like to work a little bit this way, come back to the valve and work up this way, because if you start putting the tire on, sometimes it'll peel off and you're just chasing yourself around the rim. So go from the valve, go up one side, go back the other side. So you're coming together at the top, hopefully somewhere opposite to the valve. Now a lot of the times it's really tight. It's hard to get this last little bit in. So right now, what's going to help you is if you let the rest of the air out of that tube. It's already in place, it's not going anywhere. And then that'll give you enough to get the tire on. Now it's rarely going to be simple like that. Rims do have standard size, and bead diameters are standard on tires, but all it takes is 1 or 2 millimeters difference in in the overall diameter of your rim or your tire to make it really tight. Especially on rims that are have a little step on the inside. If your tire is up on the step closer to the edge of the rim, then sometimes you're not going to have enough clearance to get the tire in. But if it is tight, you might need a tire lever. If you do decide to use a tire lever to put the tire on, be really careful you don't pinch your tube, because it's all too easy to when your tire's off and you start wedging it with the tire lever to force it on, putting it under and forcing up, it's really easy to pinch the tube between the tire lever and the tire bead. So be really careful using tools to install the tube, to install the tire on the rest of the way. It's always best, go with your fingers, move it, peel it up, a little bit by bit, put it on, deflate the tire, make sure the tire is squeezed and it's in the centered part, especially if your rim has a channel at the bottom, just make sure that the tire is sitting in that, and that'll give you as much leeway, as much slack with the bead to get it onto the other end. Once your tire is back on, your tube's in, you can reinflate it. I like to reinflate the tire bit by bit. Put maybe half of the pressure you're going to put in there. Make sure it's good. Put pressure in. Spin the wheel. Look, make sure the bead is straight. Sometimes if it hasn't seated correctly, you're going to see there'll be a hop. When you spin it, the tire is not quite completely set straight. If at that point you just let your air out of the tire, usually it'll pop back into place. Don't let all the air out. Drop it down until it's soft, but still keep everything centered. Put air in the tire again, reinflate it, check it, make sure it's nice and round, then you can go the rest of the way. Check on the side of your tire. Usually there'll be a recommendation for tire pressure, depending on the conditions and rider weight and what's on your bike. You'll want to go in that range somewhere. I talk about that in another video, but respect the pressures on the side of the tire, fill it up the rest of the way, put the tire back on your bike. Disc brakes, when you're reinstalling the wheel onto the bike, make sure your rotor goes up in between the brake caliper. For caliper brakes, V brakes, it's pretty easy. Just open the brakes up and then hook it back together. If it's V brakes, if it's calipers, don't forget to close that quick release lever. Put your quick release or your nuts back on, make sure it's nice and tight. Spin the wheel, make sure the brakes aren't rubbing, and you're good to go. Got any questions, any comments, any other videos you'd like to see, leave them in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.